Hey, what's going on, guys? How's it going? This video is the introduction to modes. Okay? Now, modes is it gets very deep, just as everything else in music theory. So this is only going to be the introductory lesson. Alright, now, if you've been reading around the internet and watching YouTube videos and stuff, there's a very good chance that you may have read and seen some conflicting information about what modes are and what modes are not. So the purpose of this video is hopefully to clear up any confusion that you may have about what modes are and what modes are not. So, with that said, I'm breaking this video into 4 parts. The first part, I'm going to explain what modes are not. Okay, I'm going to do that because I don't want anyone to be confused, okay? That's very important, what modes are not. Okay, the second part is going to be what modes are. Alright? The third part is going to be how modes are created, where they come from. The fourth part is going to be, I'm going to give some applications to actual music, okay? So this video, I expect it to run maybe 20 to 30 minutes, but hopefully after you watch the entire video lesson, you'll have a better understanding of modes, okay? So if after this video, if I left anything out, or if there's any confusion or questions, feel free to comment or send me a message through the website or whatever, and I'll try and help clear up any misunderstandings. So with that said, let me get to part 1. Okay, so part 1, what modes are not. Modes are not simply patterns on the fretboard. Okay, when I first started reading about modes many years ago, before YouTube was around, there was a lot of websites that I came across explaining what their interpretation of modes were. And what I came to realize, or what I thought at the time, was people were saying that if you start out on a certain note and you play through that pattern, then you're playing in one mode. But then if you move up the fretboard a little bit and you start out on a different note and then play that pattern, then you're playing in a different mode. And then if you move up a little bit more and you play that pattern, then you're playing in a different mode. However, that's kind of correct, but mostly incorrect, okay? Reason being, if what the band is playing, or the backing track, or whatever backing track you're using, is in the key of G major, for example, say the band is playing the chords G, C, and D, looped over and over and over. That puts you in the key of G major, okay? Your framework is the G major scale, okay? You can use notes that are out of the key as added flavor notes, just for style, but your overall ultimate framework is going to be the G major scale, okay? Now, the G major scale can be played right here in first position with your first finger, 3-note per string pattern. Okay, you can play that G major scale, and that can be your framework for soloing in the key of G major. Alright, but then if you move up to here, and you want to play a different pattern like this, okay, I moved up the fretboard a little bit, but I'm still using the same notes, but I'm still in the key of G major, okay? So even though I'm using a different pattern, I'm at a different area of the fretboard, I'm still in the key of G major, because the key is dictated by what the band is playing, what the backing track is playing, okay? So I can use this pattern, 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 it doesn't matter. I'm still in the key of G major, okay? I'm in the key of G major because the band is playing something that dictates that I'm in the key of G major, okay? I'm not switching modes. Just because I start here, I'm not in the Ionian mode, and then I play here, I'm not now in the Dorian mode, and then I'm here, I'm not in the Phrygian mode. No. I'm playing in the G major scale the whole time, okay? I'm just playing in the G major scale across the entire neck of the guitar. Another name for a major scale is the Ionian mode, okay? So I'm playing in the Ionian mode the entire time. No matter what I do, no matter what area of the fretboard I play, it's the Ionian mode, okay? So modes are not simply patterns on the fretboard. So that's the big confusing thing that a lot of people seem to have problems with. There's a lot of arguments on forums about that kind of stuff. There's a lot of just a lot of misinformation out there. So I wanted to make that perfectly clear that modes are not just patterns on the fretboard, okay? So in part 2, I'm going to explain what modes are. So let me get to that. Alright, so part 2, what modes are. What modes are is they are a tonality, okay? They are a sound. Each mode has its own particular sound, alright? So if you're familiar with the major scale and the minor scale, you already know 2 of the 7 modes, okay, of the major scale. I'll get into that in a second, but if you know the major scale and you know the minor scale, then another word for the major scale is the Ionian mode. Another word for the minor scale is the Aeolian mode, okay? So if you're at the point now where someone in the band, or the band is playing something in the key of G major, and you recognize that that's in the key of G, and you know how to solo up and down the entire fretboard in the key of G major, well, then you know how to solo in the G Ionian mode. Okay, that's that sound that you're hearing. It's a happy sound, okay? Ionian major, it's happy. Major is generally associated with happy. Alright, now if the band is playing something in the key of E minor, okay, they're playing something that goes, something like that, then you're in the key of E minor, okay? Also known as the E Aeolian mode. And you know how to solo up and down the neck in that key, then you know how to play in the E Aeolian mode, okay? The E Aeolian mode has a significantly different sound than the G Ionian mode, okay? The Ionian mode, aka the major scale, sounds happy, cheery, happy, just, you know, there's no other way to describe it. The Ionian mode, the Aeolian mode, aka the natural minor scale, sounds sad, bluesy. It's used a lot in metal, okay? It just has a distinct different sound. That's what modes are. So you hear the difference between the Ionian mode and the Aeolian mode. It's a clear difference, okay? That's what I'm trying to get at. They are tonalities, okay? They're sounds. So, but recognize that the G Ionian mode and the G Ionian mode and the E Aeolian mode, they contain the exact same notes, but they just have a different tonal center, okay? If you don't understand what I mean by that, review the lesson on the relative major-minor concept. But, you know, because E minor is the relative minor of G major, okay? So therefore they contain the same notes, but if you revolve your playing around the G, and the band is playing something in the key of G major, then it has a particular sound. G is your home note, okay? G is your tonal center. Likewise, if the band is playing something in the key of E minor, alright, and your playing is therefore based around the key of E minor, even though you're using the same exact notes, the tonality sounds different because you're now revolving your playing around the note E, okay? So the tonal center is now E. It has a different sound. It has a sad sound. It has a bluesy sound, a sound that's used in metal, okay? So that's 2 of the 7 modes right there. Now there's 5 other modes, alright? You have your Dorian mode, you have your Phrygian mode, you have your Lydian mode, you have your Mixolydian mode, and you have your Locrian mode. Okay, so there's 5 other modes. Each of those 5 modes, you can use the exact same framework, okay? You can use the same exact notes, just like the G major scale and the E minor scale use the same 7 notes spread across the fretboard. You can do the same thing with the 5 other modes, the same set of notes spread across the fretboard, but depending on which of the 7 notes you choose to be your tonal center determines the sound. It determines the tonality, determines what mode you're playing in. Okay? So sticking with the modes of G, okay, so you got G Ionian, you got E Aeolian. Okay, so sticking with the G, okay, you can also have an A Dorian. Okay? A Dorian is a mode of G. And don't worry, in part 3 I'll explain how modes are created and you'll understand why A is a mode of G. But so A Dorian is a mode of the G major scale, or the G Ionian scale. Okay, so you're using the same notes, the same framework, the same exact, all the patterns are the same, only now your playing revolves around the note A. Okay, so your home note, your tonal center is A. Therefore, you're playing A Dorian. Okay? Or you could be using those same notes, playing the same exact stuff, same framework, but if your tonal center is the note B, then it's B Phrygian, okay? And it works the same. C would be your Lydian, and then D would be your Mixolydian, then E would be your Aeolian, F sharp is your Locrian, and G is your Ionian, okay? So, same framework, alright? And trust me, part 3 hopefully will help clear this up if you're still not understanding this, but part 3 will help explain why each one of these modes is what it is. But I just want you to understand that it's a tonality, okay? G Ionian, happy. E Aeolian, sad, bluesy. A Dorian, I don't know quite how to describe it, but it's got its own sound of its own. It has its own feel. Listen to the band Fish. Fish, he uses a lot of modes when he's soloing, and of course it's the band that dictates what mode you're playing in, but the band Fish, their jams take place in the Dorian mode quite often, the Mixolydian mode quite often, the Lydian mode quite often. So they have different sounds. So each of the different sounds that you're hearing, it sounds very different than what you're used to, because what you're used to is typically major keys and minor keys. So bands like Fish and Grateful Dead and other bands that just jam a lot, they're jamming in modes. That's why they're getting those different sounds, those different tonal centers, okay? So hopefully I was able to clear that confusion up of what modes are not and what modes are. But with that said, let me get on to part 3 and show you where modes actually come from and how they're created. Okay, so how modes are created. Modes are created from modes of a particular scale, I should say, because any scale can have modes come from that particular scale. But for the purposes of this introduction to modes, I'm going to explain the modes of the major scale. Okay, so the major scale has 7 notes in it. Okay? And then it starts over. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And then it starts over on G. Okay, so we're using the G major scale for this example. If I start on the G and I end on the G, it is the G major scale, also known as the G Ionian mode. Okay? Now, if I start on the second note of the G major scale, which is an A, and I move through all the notes of the same scale, but I again end on the A, it's a different mode of the scale. Okay, so I'm going to start on the A, and I'm going to run through the scale, and I'm going to end on the A. Okay, so it's going to go. Okay, so I started on the A and I ended on the A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it starts over again on A. Okay, the same 7 notes, but I just started on the A and I ended on the A. Okay, I could also play those same 7 notes in any other area of the fretboard. So if I wanted to, I could play it in this pattern. Okay, I just played the same 7 notes, but I just played it in a little bit different area of the fretboard. Okay, see how it sounded the same? And okay, so that's the A Dorian mode, okay, because I started on A and I ended on A, and I played that particular arrangement of notes. It was the A Dorian mode, okay? So if you watch the video on the relative minor major concept, you see that where the minor scale comes from is if you start on the 6th note of the major scale and you play through the major scale using the same notes, but you start on the 6th note and you end on the 6th note, that's where your minor scale comes from. So if you don't go and watch that video, you should. That's kind of a prerequisite to this video, okay? But anyway, back to modes. So you have your G Ionian mode, you have your A Dorian mode. Alright, so now if I were to start on my 3rd note of the G major scale, which is the note B, and then play through the notes of that scale, but instead of going from G to G, which is the Ionian, or instead of going from A to A, which is the Dorian, I'm now going from B to B using the same framework. It's my B Phrygian mode. Okay, so that would sound like this. Okay, so that's your B Phrygian mode. Or you could play it like this. Okay, it doesn't matter how you play it. I'm only messing around with the same 7 notes, okay? The notes of the G major scale are G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. Those are the 7 notes of the G major scale. Every major scale has 7 notes. If I start on the 1st note and I end on the 1st note, it's your Ionian mode. If I start on the 2nd note and end on that same note, it's your Dorian mode. If I start on the 3rd note, end on that same note, it's your Phrygian mode. 4th note is Lydian, 5th note is Mixolydian, 6th note is Aeolian, also known as the natural minor scale. 7th note is the Locrian mode. Okay? So, if you wanted to, you could start on your G and go like this. That's your G major scale, or G Ionian. Or you could start on your A and go like this. That's your A Dorian mode. Or I could start on the B and go from B to B and go like this. That's your B Phrygian mode. Or I can start on the C and go to C and go. And that's your C Lydian mode. Okay? So you see how it can be confusing, how people may misinterpret modes as just simply patterns on the fretboard? But they're not simply patterns on the fretboard. They're tonalities. Okay? Because I could also, instead of playing it the pattern way like I just showed you, instead of going like this, I could also do it all right here as well, because I'm using the same exact notes. So I could go. Oops. Or. See, so I'm still playing the modes, but I'm just playing it right here in this particular pattern. It just depends on what note I start on and what note I end on, okay? So, modes are not patterns on the fretboard. Modes are tonalities. They have their own sound, and they are created from a scale. For the purposes of this video, we're talking about the modes of the major scale, and they are simply just starting and ending on a different note of the scale. So the A Dorian mode is a mode of the G major scale. The B Phrygian mode is a mode of the G major scale. The C Lydian mode is a mode of the G major scale. Okay, you understanding? And you can do this with any of the major keys too. Okay, so if I wanted to know the modes of the C major scale, also known as the C Ionian mode, Okay, so what's the second mode of the C major scale? Okay, what's the second note of the C major scale would be an exact same question. So the second note of the C major scale is D. Okay, so because the second note of the C major scale is D, D Dorian is the second note of the the second mode of the C major scale. Okay, E Phrygian is the third mode of the C major scale. Okay, you understanding? Trying to make this as clear as possible to clear up any confusion that there may be regarding what modes are and what modes are not. Okay, so now you understand why there's 7 modes of the major scale, because there's 7 notes in the major scale. Okay, so with that said, let me get on to some musical examples using the same framework, but I'm just going to be playing in different modes so you can try and hear how they sound. Okay, so that's part 4. Okay, so now in this part, I want you to actually hear how the modes sound different from each other. I'm going to use 3 different modes. I'm going to use the Ionian mode, which is known as the major scale, okay? Just another name. I'm going to use the Aeolian mode, which is another name for the minor scale. And I'm going to use the Dorian mode, okay? Now, the modes that I'm going to use, they're all going to be modes of the G major scale, okay? So your framework is going to be the same. Your framework is going to look like this. Okay? Now notice that there's nothing's highlighted. This is just a bunch of black dots. Okay? But this is my framework, okay? All these notes are available to me. No matter which notes I play, it's always going to work, okay? It's always going to be correct within the key, but the tonal center is going to change depending on which mode I play, okay? So I'm going to start out using this framework, and I'm going to start out using the G Ionian mode. Therefore, G is going to be my tonal center. Okay? So all the notes are going to light up red, and that's going to be all my notes G. Okay? Framework up and down the guitar, but G is my tonal center. Okay? So I'm playing in the G Ionian mode. Alright, and I want to they're all going to be modes of the G, the G major scale, because I want you to see how the same framework can be used just with different tonal centers. Okay, so I'm just going to lay down a simple chord progression that goes okay, so lay down that chord progression. Alright, and I'm just going to try and walk up and down the patterns. I don't want to go too fast or do too many bends or too much. I want it to be clear that I'm just playing within these patterns, okay? And it always works, but my tonal center is always going to be G, okay? So I'm going to move the diagram up to the top here so you can see what my fingers are doing, and you can also look at the fretboard pattern, okay? So let me do this. Okay, so I was working within that framework. Okay, all of those notes were available. Whatever notes I happened to choose were all part of that overall framework that you see. But G was my tonal center. It sounded happy, okay? The chords behind it dictated that I was in the key of G major. Therefore, what I was playing the G Ionian mode, okay? The mode of the whole piece of music was the G Ionian mode, okay? So now let me switch it up, and I'm going to use the same framework, same exact notes, but now I'm going to use the E minor scale. Okay, and another name for the E minor scale is the E Aeolian mode. The E Aeolian mode is the 6th mode of the G Ionian mode, okay, or the G major scale. Okay, so the E Aeolian mode is the 6th mode of the G major scale. Okay, so my chord progression is going to go like this. Okay, so I'm just kind of looping, I'm going to loop that over and over, and I'm going to use the same exact patterns, but it's going to have more of a sadder sound, or it's going to have a different tonality, okay? My tonality is going to now revolve around E, using the same framework and the same set of notes, okay? Okay, so I was using the exact same notes as before. The framework didn't change. The only difference was the backing chord progression was telling me, okay, you're now in the E Aeolian mode, therefore you should be focusing around the note E as your tonal center. Therefore, the feel and how this whole piece of music sounds is now the tonality of Aeolian, as opposed to the previous example was the tonality of Ionian. Okay, so now I'm going to lay down another chord progression, and this is going to use the A Dorian mode. Okay, so now my tonal center is going to revolve around A. Okay, same notes. I have all the same notes available to me, but now my tonal center is A. Okay, it's not G, it's not E, it's A. Same notes available though. So my progression is going to go like this. Okay, so now I'm going to play the A Dorian mode. Alright, so same notes, everything else revolves around A. Okay, so let's hear how this sounds. Okay, so that final example was using A Dorian. Okay, I was using the same framework as I did in the previous two examples. Okay, same exact set of notes available to me, same patterns available, but my tonal center was now A. So in the first example, I used this framework and my tonal center was G. Therefore, I was playing the G Ionian mode, the first mode of the major scale. The second example, I was playing in the E Aeolian mode, okay? So my tonal center was E. I was playing the 6th mode of the G major scale, okay? That's what the music dictated I should do, so I did that. The third example, I was using the A Dorian mode, okay? Same patterns, same set of notes were available to me, but I was using the 2nd mode of the G major scale, known as the A Dorian mode, okay? and hopefully you were able to recognize that each mode had a different sound to it. Okay, so the first the first example was like happy, upbeat, cheery, major sounding. The second example was sad, bluesy, however you want to describe it, minor sounding. The third example, I don't quite know how to sound it. It had a little bit of a Spanish feel to it. The progression I was using was actually from a Carlos Santana song. I don't remember exactly what song it is from him, but you know how Carlos Santana has that Spanish sound to his music a little bit, you know? So I guess the Dorian mode has a bit of a Spanishy sound to it. I don't know quite how to describe it, but it's a Dorian sound. You know, the more you play with a particular mode, you get the sound in your head, and then you just kind of familiarize yourself with it. So that's why after you start to work with these modes for a while, you go and listen to a band like Fish, you recognize, oh, okay, yeah, he's playing the Mixolydian mode. Yeah, I know that sound. That's how this stuff works. It's a different sound. So with that said, let me just close out. I'm going to give you some final words, and that's going to wrap this lesson up, okay? Alright, so some final words about modes, their uses, when you can use them, and when you shouldn't. Modes typically are not used very often by beginners or even intermediate players. Okay, so if you're still at the point where you either don't know how to play any leads at all, modes may be a bit too advanced for you. I mean, you can learn whatever you want at your own pace, but in my opinion, modes is a little bit more of an advanced concept. Or if you're still at the point where you're just playing, you're learning how to improvise, but you're only improvising within one area of the fretboard, and you're not able to solo within a key up and down the neck yet, modes may be a bit too advanced for you as well. Again, just my opinion. Modes they're used a lot in jazz. Okay, so it's a bit of an advanced thing. It doesn't mean you can't play with them if you don't want to. If you're interested in modes, by all means, venture in and learn the crap out of modes, you know. But one thing I do want to say is most music that you hear on the radio, most popular music, is either done in a major key or a minor key. Okay, most of the stuff you hear is major or minor key stuff. All right, the reason being is because modes typically don't work with chord progressions. All right, so usually music is consisted of chord progressions, you know, 3, 4, 5 chords played over and over. Modes typically work with just a 1 to 2 chord vamp, okay? So modes will work, like if you wanted to play something like the B Phrygian mode, that may work best if the rhythm section is just going like this. Okay, just playing the B over and over. Okay, that's what I mean by a vamp. So you can kind of make your Phrygian sound come from that because the chords aren't moving in a particular fashion. When chords are moving in a progression style, modes typically don't work. All right. Now there's exceptions to everything. This isn't a hard rule, but generally the music that you hear, there's chord progressions. There's something going on like. So for that, what I was just doing right there, you're going to have a difficult time trying to fit a mode over that. You're going to have a hard time using some sort of mode over that other than just your minor scale. So for that example, the mode that would work would be the Aeolian mode, okay, the minor scale. Alright, so if you were to try and fit the Dorian mode over that, you may be able to do it. I don't know, but modes typically don't work over progressions. Phrygian mode, again, you're gonna find that some of the notes sound sour, okay? But when you just have like a 1 or 2 chord vamp playing over and over and over, that's when modes work best. All right. It also works in jazz when there really is no tonal center. When you know, you're playing over one chord and you're in this key, and then they're playing this other chord, and then you're in that key, and then they're playing this other chord, and you're constantly switching keys and stuff. But that's beyond the scope of this video. Point being is most music that you hear is either major or minor. So most music is either in the Ionian mode or the Aeolian mode. Alright? So that's that. I just want to give you a couple last diagrams because I did make these diagrams, and I don't know, I just want to add these to the video. Even though this video is pretty long as it is, I just wanted to add it. So take a look down here. This is your mode. This is your framework, okay? All the notes are black. All the notes are blacked out. Therefore, this is just a framework with no mode specified yet, okay? So if I wanted to use this framework as the G Ionian mode, okay, see how all the notes lit up? Those are all the notes G. So I can use this framework centering around the G. That becomes my G Ionian mode. Alright? Now if I want to switch this up, now I highlighted all the notes A. Okay? So now this is my A Dorian mode, all up and down the fretboard. Alright? Now if I want to switch this up again, I highlighted all the notes B. This is my B Phrygian mode. Alright? All the same notes, just a different tonal center. Okay, so now I switch it up again. Now I highlighted all the C's, so therefore this is my C Lydian mode. Now I switch it up again, and now it's my D Mixolydian mode, because I highlighted all the notes D within the same framework. Now I switch it up again. Now I highlighted all the notes E, and this is my E Aeolian mode, also known as the E minor scale. Now I switch it up one last time, and this is my F sharp Locrian mode. Same framework, just focusing around the note F sharp. Alright? So, hopefully I didn't sound too redundant. Hopefully I didn't repeat myself a million times, but I've been reading forums and I've been watching videos on YouTube for a while, and I know there's a lot of confusion, so that's why if I tend to ramble on and on and on about something that you're like, alright dude, I get it, that's my reason. There's a lot of confusion. I wanted this video to clear it up for anyone that's confused, okay? And as I said, if there's any misunderstandings or any questions or anything, send me a message and I'll be glad to answer it. Thanks a lot for watching.